Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, geeks, nerds, ambassadors everywhere, and welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing and another installment of the Council of One's Babylon 5 review. And glad that you're all here today, and hope you're having a great day and a great Friday. So it's good to be back, and we've got three-fourths of the council here, more or less. You know them, you love them. They are my fellow council members. They are my friends. Bester's Mountains, aka Mountains of Elysium, and back from his long overdue expedition beyond the rim, the one and the only Zod Rider. Gentlemen, good to have you here. Glad to see you back, Zod. And to everybody in the chat, Louise X Sparrow, Bureau 31, Archer Colin, and everybody else that is lurking, good to have you here and hope you're having a great day. And we are continuing our review of season 4. And today we're going to be breaking down the episode Racing Mars. So, gentlemen, good to see you both.
Great to be here, Ambassador. And this is a fantastic episode to talk about. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely. And of course, our fellow council member, Fiona Wolf, who is unfortunately not with us. She has work. I mean, you have to work, you have to live, and sometimes life gets in the way of the fun stuff. But she, as always, has provided us with a nice little review video for us to break down and listen to. So I'm not going to stand on any further ceremony here, because, well, as Bain said, we don't stand on ceremony here, Mr. Wayne. Actually, that was pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to pull up Fiona's video. We will give it a listen, and we will go from there. So just give me 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, quite literally. And here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, here we go. And Fiona, wherever you are, thank you, darling. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next time. But here are Fiona Wolf's thoughts on Racing Mars.
Okay, so basically Babylon 5 Racing Mars. It's kind of like a little quiet moment before the big storm breaks out with basically the whole Civil War and everything else that's going to go falling into place. And you really get the sense that Marcus, while pleasant in short bursts, it kind of grates on Franklin eventually, where it's just like, how does this guy have all this bundled up energy? Well, I guess it makes for a good point that Marcus is an excellent ranger because of that. But the whole I spy with my little eye thing is pretty hilarious. Like, even more boxes. Oh, man. And, those poor guys, man, being cooped up. Like, even if I was cooped up with my best friend for like 2+ weeks, I think we would be reaching a breaking point in some ways. So yeah, there is that. I do like the fact that Ivanova just nonchalantly is like, okay, I'm now relieving you of command, because like in the past X amount of months, Sheridan has died, come back to life, and then he ended a big great war. So she's like, you need some time off. And he's like, he doesn't even kind of know what to do with his time off. But luckily for everyone, Delenn will handle that pretty well. Because if I remember correctly, this is the Woo-Hoo episode. Here, let me go check real quick. Yep, it is the Woo-Hoo. Because she's like, oh yes, we have to discover more parts of ourselves, right? And he's like, oh, that's interesting. And then when he goes to her apartment, it's like, wait, why is there an audience? Including Lanier. Oh no. And on the other side of things, for Marcus and And Dr. Franklin, their cover stuff is the honeymoon suite. So Marcus has to make the jokes of like, "Oh, our mother was always worried." Oh God, you never get me anything nice. So yeah, this series does play on a lot of awkwardness that can go into romance, but it does it in such a good natured way you can't help but laugh. Another thing that stands out to me is the fact that the Drock are working so quickly. Because yeah, while you view the episode for the first time, you don't realize these keepers come from the Drock, but they're already putting their feelers out to mess with humanity, to mess with the Minbari, all the people that basically took their masters away, and they're already starting to meddle because they see themselves as the shadows, or at least the inheritors of what the shadows were doing, and that's going to cause a lot of problems for our heroes later. And also, you get to see a little bit more of how Sheridan and Garibaldi are breaking apart because, if I remember correctly, yep, looking at it, yeah, Sheridan and Garibaldi go head to head, and he has to basically he talks to Delenn about this later, like, can we ever get back together, and have that same level of friendship? Eventually, they will, but it will definitely change their dynamic for a while, and it feels like for like the rest of the series, Garibaldi's going to be trying to make up for the fact that something that was out of his control, Vester's machinations, he's going to try to set things right again. And of course, this will put him in position to overtake certain things on Mars when the time comes too. Some of the characters in this series start off in such a low point, and then throughout the rest of the series, it kind of like their fortunes change. Same goes, in the other direction. Malari started off as a lighthearted kind of, carefree man, and eventually the weight of everything he did comes crashing down on him. Granted, he does have quite a few true allies, but it just showcases like how you can mirror certain kinds of things and still maintain a sense of hope in some cases. That's ultimately what kind of attracted me to Babylon 5. It isn't all just dark and dreary stuff. There's a balance, there's a thread of hope running through it, and not just for one character. And like I highlighted earlier, Ivanova has excellent negotiation skills, or at least I did on social media, where this is one of my favorite quotes from this episode. The Raiders like, "Oh, my pilots don't have accidents," and Ivanova replies, "They will. I'll see to it." "You wouldn't. I've got a 200 megawatt pulse cannon in the forward cargo bay that says otherwise." So Ivanova has very shrewd negotiation skills because even in the opening of the episode, their lines of getting supplies and communications and everything else is getting extremely hammered by now, and so they have to basically have dalliances with the black market to get what they need. And eventually, once the Interstellar Alliance and everything is established, well, that'll kind of course correct itself eventually. But they had to basically give motivation for, like, we got to nip this in the bud with Clark. So that's why, Marcus and Franklin were sent to essentially create new ties with Mars. And the way the propaganda has worked, yeah, most people within Earth's, territory don't even realize that everybody fought the Shadow War. And even though Mars has more direct links with some of Ranger activity, even that wasn't enough to convince them that, like, hey, you just left us out here hanging out in the open with Clark constantly beating on us. So in a way, Babylon 5 has to repair some of its reputation because once you're beaten to death with propaganda enough, eventually you'll start believing the lies. Sure, it would have helped if Sheridan could go and directly meet with everybody, but he shot out point blank, like his face is all over the Earth sector. The instant he steps in there, he'll get arrested, which we all get to find out later when Mr. Garibaldi basically sets up certain things, and it's just like, oops, daisy. Because Bester also wanted revenge on most of the command staff, because they basically didn't toe the line that Bester wanted them to. So this was his way of getting back at literally everybody that ever upset him or crossed him. And this episode definitely sets up some of those threads. Mr. Garibaldi will be very lucky that he has some people on hand eventually that will be able to validate him with the Mars resistance. Man, Lita will eventually come in with a saving throw with that. But to get back to the immediate episode, I like the fact that they had, Lita in her little Vorlon kind of code words with Captain Jack. But the whole time, Captain Jack was trying to relay that there's something wrong with him. Because the Drock put a keeper on him in the middle of the night, even though he didn't actually see who the Drock were. He knows something's wrong. And he was trying to showcase different things, like people that knew him. He was acting contradictory to what they were used to. Because, even some of the members of the Resistance remarked, like, wait, Captain Jack used to be into this, or that. And Captain Jack you kind of see him going to the bottle a little bit to showcase that, yes, the keeper doesn't like alcohol or doesn't really hold its alcohol very well. But I just like those little things where it Dr. Franklin and the others eventually pick up on this. And then you have Dr. Franklin suddenly going into like super doctor mode. It's like, oh my God, what is this thing? Because he wants to try to examine it, after all said and done. Rest in peace, Captain Jack, in a way. Because he, unfortunately, even though they shot the keeper off the guy's shoulder, Captain Jack knows it'll come back. Because Captain Jack tried to kill it a couple of times, at least from what I could get from the dialogue. And to make sure that he's not a linchpin in the downfall of the Resistance, he basically sacrifices himself to prevent further abuse. And it's just like, oh man, even for just a character that only showed up for one episode, they all make an impact somehow. Which, I hope one day more people can eventually kind of take that idea and run with it. Many indies are also trying to do this, but you know what? It just makes me realize that there's some timeless factor with Babylon 5. You don't have to link it to any current era. He just knows how archetypes play off each other, But ultimately, to denote with Garibaldi's situation, the mysterious men that were kind of surveilling him, Bester wants that to happen. Bester wants Garibaldi to be on the out and out with everybody, so that way he attracts the eye of what will eventually be revealed, Mr. William Egger, because Mr. Egger is interested in dismantling certain things with Psychor. And for everyone's favorite villain to hate, he doesn't want anything to hurt his precious core. So yeah, Garibaldi's set up to be the linchpin in quite a few plans. But in a way, that's a silver lining for Sheridan eventually, because Clark's forces will trust Garibaldi a bit more. Because it's like, oh, it's the guy who betrayed his friends and handed over Sheridan. So they'll trust him to a certain point. Because overall, if you're a big-time betrayer, most times, most sides won't trust you either way. Because, heck, if you betrayed somebody once before, you'll do it again or again and again. So, yeah, like, this whole episode just shows some things coming to the breaking point for our cast and crew and all the characters involved. Because after this, we're also going to get into the Minbari Civil War. So this is kind of like the last hurrah of the characters being a bit relaxed until basically the end of season 4. So have a good day, everybody.
Vienna, you never cease to impress. So, guys,
you gotta love that enthusiasm. It's literally infectious. It makes it feel like Babylon 5 is a brand new series all over again.
Well, I don't know, Zod, if you saw the tweet that Mr. Szynski sent out. So either he was talking about more B5 or possibly him being involved with a certain British sci-fi show, possibly. But yeah, and that's a topic we can discuss later after we get done with the review if y'all want to or not. But, you know, she brings up a lot of very good points because you look at this episode, it is from here, it just turns into 100 miles of bad highway with a pothole every 10 feet for the crew. But yeah, you have to admit, she makes a very good point. In small doses, Marcus is quite charming and enthusiastic and just altogether fun. But in long doses where you're on a several day or week long trip to Mars, get your ass to Mars. Sorry, I could not resist. This particular episode is just rife for quoting the classic Total Recall with Schwartz with Arnie. But honestly, there is some really great comedic writing in this episode, but there's also some very heart-wrenching moments in this episode as well, particularly between Sheridan and Garibaldi, because here, I have to admit, what Garibaldi did to Sheridan in that interview was just absolutely cold-blooded backstabbing, but at the same time, it's not entirely Garibaldi's fault. So what do you do? Do you haul off and deck him? Or do you shove him in a psychiatric clinic and say, okay, doc, figure out what's wrong with his head because he didn't used to be an asshole. Yes, I said it. Mr. Garibaldi.
That's exactly what you do. You throw him in. He goes into the psych ward for no less than 90 days to find out what the hell's going on. There you go. Yeah. I mean, come on.
There is a danger with that. I mean, who says once we can see that Garibaldi is clearly something's wrong? But had we not, and I think it would have been interesting if they never shown the control or those things happening all along, and we just saw Garibaldi reacting, how would we feel? Because Sheridan has been purposely acting up on his persona to rally people. He needed to do it. And Garibaldi is acting like a dick. And then we're saying he should have been psychiatrically assessed,
evaluated.
Assessed. But then that's because we see Sheridan as the good guy. But what if it was Ari Benzane was the captain of Babylon 5 and he had that power? Okay, you've disagreed with me. You're in the psych ward. It would be the right thing to do to Garibaldi because we know there's something wrong. But that kind of power in the wrong hands is very dangerous.
Yes. Well, and Sheridan is walking a tightrope right now. He's trying to figure out how in the hell they're going to kick off this whole revolution against Clark's EarthGov. I mean, a absolutely tyrannical dictatorship. I mean, he's worse than King George. No offense. Actually, no, great offense. I mean that. I mean, Clark is a mixture of a little short German dude from the 1930s and King George. And you just want to absolutely just thunder punch him in the throat. And unfortunately, he doesn't get his just due because, like a coward, he shoots himself. And I think, honestly, and I know I'm jumping way ahead, but I just want to say this. I think them having Clark kill himself was kind of a callback to when the little short German dude offed himself before the end of World War II.
Well, that's debate. That's up for debate, though. That's kind of debatable, given historical records. But I think that Clark. I actually really wanted to see Clark get confronted, to be honest with you.
Oh, you're
You know,
not.
I feel like suicide once again, you know, is the easy way out for these villains. So it's sort of, you know, I don't know. That was really kind of the only thing I took a little bit of issue with. I didn't really want to see him do that, but at the same time, I kind of felt like him offing himself like that was appropriate when you look at real world political dictators, megalomaniacs type of scenarios. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you think about, we'll get back on topic. I kind of want to wrap up this particular point real quick. Think about what type of trial he would have got,
Yeah.
because he would have still had all his sympathizers, all his cronies, unless they were all rounded up or they all turned themselves in, which I seriously doubt, because they would have been on trial for war crimes themselves, or crimes against humanity, I think would be more accurate. So it's almost like a catch-22 situation. It's almost like, okay, what if they had executed Order 65 instead of 66, and Palpatine had been put on trial? Well, he controls everything. What do you think could happen? So, but anyway, the other interesting aspect of what Fiona brought up was, of course, the implication that the Drock, though they're not seen on screen this episode, we'll see them next week, I believe it is. And you see Jack, a human, has a keeper on him. Now the question is this the Drock that did it? Or is this the Psychor working with the Drock who did it? My guess, I think the Psychor had themselves some keepers on hand. Because if you think about it, essentially keepers are or could be shadow tech, not so much Drock tech. Because remember, the Drock didn't necessarily create anything. They just had caches of old shadow tech, or supplies of shadow tech. Let's just put it that way. So who's to say that the Shadows didn't supply the Psychor with keepers, or Clark's government with keepers? Just depends on what branch.
I believe that the Drock have basically infiltrated everything.
Yeah, they may have they may have used back channels to infiltrate into Psychor potentially. Because let's be honest, the Psychor was in league with the Shadows, essentially, until the Shadows went away, and then Psychor got freaked out, and they're like, "Oh crap, we're losing control, and we've got to get things sorted out here. So what the hell do we do? Oh yeah, we got all this shadow tech laying around. Let's start implanting them on people."
Yeah, pretty much.
So, Elysium, your thoughts?
I was just struck. I had wondered before, had Clark a keeper? But then that would be giving too much of an excuse for people to say, that there are evil people like Clark in our history. And that would be giving people like that a pass by saying, well, there was always some reason. And it kind of lessens what they do. So it was just a thought that I had there while we were chatting.
Yeah,
I don't think he did this to my...
No, the way he acted, the way he behaved, he was an opportunist, and the Shadows seized upon that opportunity. And they had liaisons with the Psychor, and with the particular branches of EarthGov, and they got in with Clark. So, and he was like, "Ooh, I get to be president over the whole planet, and not to mention not just this planet, but all the other planets in the EarthGov Federation. Yeah, I think I'll do that. Thank you. Oh yeah, you want to give me some shadow technology, or we'll just kind of keep some shadow technology around to experiment with? Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll take that." And I will bring up Beer 31's comment here. I think that Clark had a keeper at the later stage. Um, Bureau, it's a possibility. We don't know concretely if he did or not. But considering, he had that whole scorched earth thing that he wrote on his desk. So it's a distinct possibility that it's a possibility that he could have had a keeper implanted on him towards the end, and that was because the humans were such a detriment to or such a influence to the shadows going beyond the rim, and the Drakk losing all their support, and they wanted revenge on the humans for that. I mean, it's a possibility, because what better way to destroy Earth than not even showing your hand that you did it? So, and I want to send a shout out to the chat, Lewis Cox. Lewis, it's good to see you. Thank you for tuning in. But fellas, any thoughts on anything else Fiona brought up in her video, or your thoughts, or particularly your thoughts on the episode itself?
I was just thinking about, she mentioned Ivanova's negotiation skills with the smugglers.
The black market? Yep.
Oh, yes. That was, my pilots don't have accidents. They will. I'll see to it. That was just classic Ivanova.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And Fiona touched on everything, so wonderfully. It's like she just sums up the entire episode. It's like, wow.
Actually, I was just thinking one of the smugglers is, I think, a couple of them were extras in Third Space. You could see them milling around in the background. So it's nice kind of playthrough that you see. They're not just kind of actors of the week just appearing. They have been in other episodes or in other shows, playing around in the background, but not interacting with any of the characters, just there in the background, like the monks you see walking around every now and again.
Yeah, and that is a possibility as well. I mean, and I have to say, I do love that whole scene with Ivanova and the black market people. It, as Fiona mentioned, it just very eloquently sets the groundwork for what's going to happen later on with the Interstellar Alliance. I mean, if you think about it, these black market dealers are going to, I mean, she says it, you're not going to get rich, but you're going to make a profit. And she's like, you work with us and we will give you the best of everything we've got. And you'd like to think that maybe some of those black market people went on to be somewhat legit and work with the Interstellar Alliance itself.
I always, myself and my wife watched a show from Colombia, Pablo El Patron del Mal, about Pablo Escobar. Mm-hmm. And they showed up, he was an evil guy, but we did say, if he had been good and turned those skills to benefit people, he mightn't have been as rich as he was. He still would have been rich, and he could have made such a difference. The same here with the smugglers. They may have had, like lurkers, have had a life that crime may have been their only way of not becoming homeless or victims. Mm-hmm. And by Babylon 5 giving them the opportunity to say, clean slate, we know you've done things in the past, because they do mention basically smugglers, racketeering, the whole lot. But okay, you have a new chance at a new life, almost like the Foreign Legion for the French. Give you a new name, new life. Your past is in the past. You can move forward and make a new life, an honest life, and not have to look over your shoulder.
Yeah,
and exactly. If people took that chance with others, maybe with people who have been in crime, it's a way of dealing with people. Turn your skills to something to benefit society, like the mind wipe, where you serve the society you hurt. Mm-hmm. Gives people a chance. It's just an interesting way of dealing with things. And Babylon 5 are in trouble because they don't have the supply routes. And turning a bad into a good for the benefit of both. Again, back to Ivanova, a great skill.
Yeah. because you think about it. The economic system of the future, which Straczynski did a very good job of laying out in this series, is not completely dissimilar from what the one we currently have. And we recognize the fact that we have a black market, and that black market still exists in the year 2261, or 2261. And it has evolved. It's gotten more technologically advanced because, well, we have the technological advancement now. And that has always been one of the really interesting things for me about a series like Babylon 5. It feels like a lived-in universe. It doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel phony. It doesn't feel artificial. It's got grime. It's got grit. It's got this lived-in feel to it, like old leather. If you think about it, it's comfortable. It's in a manner of speaking, and
it's been broken in clearly.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing for me with this episode also is the advancement of John and Delenn's relationship, and I will say this for the Minbari. They have a very interesting perspective on well, let's just be candid here, we're all adults. The Minbari have a very interesting perspective on sex. I mean, they spent a whole bloody night discovering each other's pleasure centers. And I cannot help, I mean, I know everybody else is probably going to make a comment about this, and that's fine, you can. But Lanier's look on his face when he gets into the lift with John, and he keeps looking back at him and looking back at him and looking back at him, he goes, "Woohoo!" And Sheridan's just kind of sitting there, I was like, "Okay, please let me drop it. Let me drop through the floor of this lift or something. Let me get the hell out of here. I don't care anything.
Exactly. Out.
Let me out of here."
That was that's not the first time I'd like to meet the in-laws.
Well, the funny thing is, those aren't even Delenn's in-laws per se. They're just randoms from her caste or from the religious caste or whatever, or her clan rather.
And interested onlookers from the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, Lanier, who is carrying a torch for Delenn, and he's standing right outside the room meditating, and they can hear everything. And oh, good grief! It's absolutely comical, but it also goes to show that maybe and yes, I'm going to use this word, and no, I don't care, that the Minbari are a little more progressive about the whole concept of sex. They're not as uptight as us humans are. Because you look at John's face, and he's like, "We're gonna," and she's like, "Uh-huh," and she's like, "Well, they're," and she's like, "Uh-huh," and he's like, "Delenn, no, I can't," and he's being very prudish here, but at the same time, she's got a very, she's like, "Oh, come on, it'll be fun," and he's like, "Okay." I'm sorry. I don't mean to get a case of the giggles, but this particular part of this episode makes me laugh. So, and I'll bring up Elysium's comment here. The in-laws forming a circle, chanting and playing instruments while we discover each other's nightmare scenario. I mean, let's just be honest here. There are two episodes that very distinctly kind of summarize the whole concept of sex in the future. One is and how humans and aliens interact with each other sexually. One is the episode with the Lumati with Ivanova, and then this episode between John and Delenn. And
let's be honest, though, if it had been Ivanova's display that Lanier was watching on instead of Woo-Hoo, he'd be going, "What the F?"
Probably. He'd be like, "This is the human idea of sex? Are you kidding? It's very unproductive."
Colin actually brings up a good point on that one, that was too part of human culture as well. The relatives watching on.
Yeah. Colin, my master is a history has a history degree, and I've done a fair bit of research on my own, and I'm like, yeah, I know about that, and I'm like, man, we were screwed up in the Middle Ages. You want us to what? You want us to do? You want us to what? I'm like, no, you get the hell out of the bedroom and you let me and my spouse have our time alone. Go away. Shoo. We'll let you know if we made a kid. Go away. You'll find out in a few weeks.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll let you know. Go away. I mean, Delenn makes it sound very prim and proper, but you're thinking, Delenn, it's sex. You just go in there and you have fun. Hey, I resemble that remark. Okay, I have absolutely no idea what that means, Colin. I'm sorry if I offended you. Didn't mean to, but it's just it to me. It's very comical. Of course, it brings to memory a favorite quote of mine from a favorite movie, and that is, of course, Dogma. And it's between Lyndon Fiorentino's character Bethany Sloan and the late Alan Rinkman as the Metatron, the voice of God. And she's like, sex is a joke in heaven. He's like, from what I understand, sex is a joke down here on earth as well. You should see the faces you all make mid-coitus. Yes, I've seen Dogma way too many times. I don't care, and I'm eventually going to find a copy of it. But yeah, I sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent, but I think it needed to be said, and I might as well be the one who said it. But fellas, I'm sorry, I don't mean to ramble. Your thoughts, please, on any part of the episode.
Actually, just going back to that, it's just being in a mixed race relationship, and well, most things are the same. There are some subtle differences, but not to the extent that that they've gone through much of the process, the rituals that are really important to the Minbari. That helps pretty much glue their society together. And there's, I said the note there, was it 52 more to go? Good God, the poor guy. 52 rituals in the relationship. That's it, sorry, just rooting through the Lurker's Guide.
Yeah, we don't have that many in human culture, for heaven's sake. I mean, unless you're like uber religious, maybe. I mean, hey, you want to get married? Yeah, here's a ring. Okay, let's set a date. Okay, we're setting a date. Okay, let's start planning the wedding. Okay, we planned the wedding. Okay, let's go get married. Okay, Minbari, we have 52 rituals. Like, has anybody ever eloped?
Well, I mean, especially nowadays, people just get married on Zoom.
I'm sorry, that just doesn't sound right to me.
Get married. Well, at least it's not Skype.
True.
Well, yeah.
Or emojis in a text chat.
Right. Could you imagine getting married that way? Especially with all like the misinterpretations in like text messages.
Oh, good grief! I'm just wrong. And how do you kiss? And don't tell me that first kiss doesn't matter.
They've got emojis for that, right?
It don't count. If you're not touching the other person's lips, it doesn't count. And I do want to bring up Colin's comment here. Sheridan, Delenn, Sarah, and Amanda. That's a real mixed race. Yeah. Now you really have to wonder what are the courting rituals and the matrimonial rituals for a Vulcan.
I just want to know why. I just want to know why swollen balls is trending on Twitter right now. Are they listening to this podcast? Okay, never mind.
I have absolutely no idea. I can't even fathom why the term or the hashtag swollen balls would be trending on Twitter right now. And I'll bring up Beer 31's comment here. Do the Minbari have like an equation to calculate the required number of rituals?
Yeah, probably have a ritual for that.
They have a ritual for the ritual for the ritual. And Valen's probably sitting in Minbari heaven going, oh, good grief, you people are weird. Oh, good night. Oh. Oh, where did the stream go? We were talking about the economic system of the future, and now we're talking about about sex between a human and a Minbari.
And swollen balls. Yeah. Okay. Never mind.
Oh, sorry. I got a case of the giggles. Okay, come on, get it straight at Master. Get your game face on.
Instead of the wedding march, it's dun, 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 dun.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, good.
We're gonna start having in another 50 to 100 years. We're gonna start having Panfar rituals on planet Earth. I mean,
Yes.
I don't want to be alive when that happens.
Podfar. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. Wrong show.
No, it's all, you're fine. You're fine. Well, heaven only knows what the Minbari call sex. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the Minbari have rituals and the Centauri have multiple genitalia. Could you imagine what it'd be like if the Minbari and the Centauri got together?
There's a ritual for that.
And then let's just for the sake of argument, yeah, there's a ritual for that, but let's just for the sake of argument throw a Narn in there for good measure.
Oh no. That would be an Interstellar Alliance 3-way.
Yeah, there you go. all over the blanket. I don't know.
Oh,
wow.
Okay.
That's going in the private chat, and I've no way to put it in the public.
What did you say?
No way I'm putting that in public chat.
Yeah, I mean, they've probably got places in the Zocalo for that. There's probably like certain areas you can go in, certain VIP areas where that particular thing that you mentioned in the private chat is actually very trendy on the station. I'm just guessing here, but I'm pretty sure that's a possibility.
And a low gravity more plausible, I think.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I think we killed the ambassador.
It's different, hydraulics, and then while they're having that big interstellar orgasm or that interstellar orgy, they can bring in a Pakmara and a Drazi and just go all out.
Well, let's just okay. You have to,
And I mean, imagine a soul hunter. I mean,
I don't want.
Just saying. I mean,
let's. Okay. I might as well say it. This stream has gone very blue. I might as well make it even bluer. I would wager. I would wager.
Blue are like swollen balls.
not that type of blue, but
not that type of blue. Okay, purple.
Okay. Might as well jump the shark and be done with it. You could say that the Pakmara are very good at are very cunning linguists.
Oh, indeed. I mean, you get the Pakmara, you get some Psychor people in there, and you get Captain Lockley, and I'm sure you could have quite a party. Personally, I think that'd be a lot of fun. I mean, at least from an observer perspective, like we are talking about, these episodes.
I just say to Games, I derailed things a few minutes ago, so you're not the only one.
And I just want to shout to Chad, Games, Movies, and Comics R Us. I am so Games, you came in at probably the most interesting part of the stream. We were talking about the ritual between with Delin and Sheridan, where he goes woohoo the morning after, and we were discussing science fiction sexual relations amongst different species, and I made a comment about the Pakmara being cunning linguists. If you get my drift, and I'm sure you do. And I'll bring up Colin's comment here. The stream has gone blue, says the man who literally has a blue skinned avatar. Oh, Sheridan does have a Parvalorian anymore, right? Right? We would assume not. And out beyond the rim, Lorian's going. I'm feeling a very warm sensation.
Well, they actually, when you think about that, when you think about those types of interactions and intercourse that would occur, they're going beyond the rim quite a bit.
Say that one more time, Zod. I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying when you think about those kinds of sexual interactions that are occurring on Babylon 5, they're going beyond the rim quite a bit.
Oh my God! You went there.
Okay.
Well, of course,
it's just a regular occurrence on Babylon 5. I mean.
Well, there are certain certain regulations between. I think it's like in season 1 or whatever, where a human. And
I was thinking maybe that's why President Clark was the way he was. Maybe he had swollen balls and he hadn't been going beyond the rim enough. Maybe that's what it was. I mean, that kind of thing can get to your brain if it's not taken care of. I mean, that could actually, I think that could literally account for a good percentage of evil dictators. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, they're just very, very, very,
very sexually frustrated.
Repressed, whatever way you want to put it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see if we can get the stream back on some semblance of a course, if at all possible, and not intercourse, and particularly not intercourse amongst different alien species. Oh, good grief. Okay.
Just to rescue a small bit, we could talk about, I mentioning and looking through my notes, the Mars Resistance and how number 2 was set up as a villain. He was what Manny would portray as a racist, a bigot, and he just was really mean and nasty. And yet he was a good guy. And I like that play how JMS shows it's not black and white, it's gray. But as Fiona mentioned in her thing, there's still a thread of hope running through as Marcus and Franklin are there to liberate them, to be the savior they are looking for.
Yeah, and the number two, I can understand why he is the way he is. That whole mentality, that whole mindset, I get it, because when you're trying to duck a tyrannical government, you're going to look out for your own neck and the necks of those around you. And he says it. He's like, there are two types around here. Those are us and those that are, well, dead. And, I can understand that mentality to a degree. I don't say I can't say I necessarily disagree with it, because the Mars Resistance has had a knife to their throat ever since Clark when it came into power. And it's, we'll get it at the end of the season, the whole concept that Mars will finally be its own free government. But they have to go through hell to get it. But it'll be very satisfying to see a free Mars. And, I have to say this. I just wonder sometimes if Straczynski didn't borrow a few threads, or maybe he just thought that the whole short story that was the basis for Total Recall, he used a little bit of that for inspiration for the entire idea of a free
obviously, yeah.
And yeah, and I have to say it. I don't think in this case it's necessarily him stealing anything. He borrows certain elements, but I think in a lot of ways also, if we look forward into the future, if we ever do colonize Mars or even get further out, I doubt we'll ever live to see it at this rate. Sorry, a bit of a pessimist here. I don't mean to be, but
Well, I mean, you're making sense. I mean, come on. How long you think it'll be before we colonize Mars? Probably a good 200 years, 300 years.
If we're lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, by this point, we were supposed to, at this point, I think it was a couple episodes before this, they had that whole thing with ISN, and we should already be on the freaking moon. And here we are still stuck on Earth, bickering like a bunch of idiots. No offense to anybody out there. I'm not saying we're all idiots. Just certain
the vast majority.
Just certain corners of the internet, but that's his conversation.
Humanity, when you think about it as a whole, is an absolutely ridiculous species. We can't even get over hang-ups on skin color and race and various political nonsensical arguments. All of these things have to be settled and need to be brought to a head before we can even worry about colonizing anything in space. I mean, the way the planet Earth is now, we can't colonize our sock drawer. It's ridiculous. It's hard to be optimistic. I mean, you look at, for example, the stuff that Straczynski is showing here, and you see all the parallels with like the ideas of like the free Mars movement and all that stuff. I mean, when we finally do get to a point where Mars is actually colonized, I do hope that humanity is at least at peace with each other by that point. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
So. Yeah.
I have a funny feeling one could work for the other, that, yep, we are at each other's throats down here. Even within countries where we find reasons to fight. But if we colonize and look outwards and we see more horizons, people will be pushing out, like what happened in the United States. People pushed west. There was many bad things done, but there's no one out there at the moment to oppress. And I think people working together, we can see, it's like we see in The Expanse. Mars is colonized. Races no longer matter, but yet there is still the Belt, Mars, Earth are still entities that are opposed to each other, but the races have stopped mattering. We see the same in Babylon 5, races have stopped mattering. They're bigoted towards aliens, and they're bigoted among colonies, where the colony Marcus came from was bigoted towards Earthers. Mars is bigoted towards everyone. Understandable. They're looking for their freedom. And yet we see in this episode that, I think, just what JMS said about gay marriage, it's not a thing that people worry about.
Exactly.
They don't care. And that's what I loved about this episode. It was just where Marcus was joking about Franklin locking himself in the bathroom. And it was just fun. And it didn't matter. Races didn't matter. Sorry, Ambassador.
No, it's okay. It's all right, Elysium. Go ahead. And
that's something I saw since I've got into the relationship with my wife. We're different races, and I'm more aware of things, and also realize there's far less difference between us than people would make out. People are the same all over the world. They want the same things for their kids. And I think the B5, there's so much optimism that yet while there's fighting, it's not over race, gender, or religion. I mean, Marjorie, there's a woman, a very capable woman running the Mars Resistance.
Yes.
There's a very capable woman in Delenn and Sheridan, man, working together. The gender doesn't matter. And sorry, I've been rambling a small bit. So
no, Elysium, you're right on point here. That's something that, and I don't want to get off on a big tangent here, and I do want to bring up Beer 31's comment, and then I'll give my 2 cents on this. Because Lord Runner, what war? Remember, we basically beat the Tsar. We beat Sauron and the armies of Mordor, and we kicked the Vorlons and Shadows out of our galaxy permanently. What war?
Yes.
That war. But and I seriously think I need to do a video or a stream about this. And I've mentioned this before. Pop culture evolves as our culture evolves. It is a reflection of the culture in which we live. We may not necessarily like everything that is reflected in pop culture about our culture, but it's not all bad. It's not all negative. It's not all a hot pile of garbage. There is merit in it. But I think the thing we need to really do is have an honest conversation with ourselves, both on a group level and on an individual level, is say, okay, the culture I see is different from what I'm accustomed to. So do I want to look at what's good within it and celebrate that and have an honest conversation about it? Or do I simply just want to have a pissing and moaning session and just complain about what I don't like? You can not like something, that's fine, but have the integrity and the authenticity to give an honest critique and not just be a negative, closed-minded individual. I'm trying to be somewhat diplomatic here. I will say this, and I will continue to say this. Pop culture has been evolving since man drew on the walls of caves, since the invention of the printing press, since the first motion picture was created. And what we as the public and those of us that do these reviews and these critiques have to do as well is present our own perspective in an honest and authentic manner. Yes, and Louise, I will agree with that wholeheartedly. Well, it just depends. You can be honest and negative if it's really bad. Yes, and I have there have been things that have come out that I did not care for. I mean, I will be candid with you all. I did not care for Bad Batch. I thought after a while it simply got boring. That's why I stopped my reviews of it. That's why I privatized those streams, because honestly, I would rather have my channel be focused on stuff that I do enjoy. That's why I did give an honest critique of Shang-Chi. I did enjoy it. I didn't see what everybody else saw in it. And to be perfectly honest, I think that some of the perspectives were not altogether authentic about that movie. But that is another conversation for another time. You have your right to voice your opinion, but at least be honest about it. It's as you said, Elysium, it's not a simple matter of black and white. It's, and no pun intended whatsoever, it is shades of gray. Because we all have our own biases that we bring into, and we have our own perspectives that we bring into these realms of fandom and pop culture. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I've spent nearly 2 years covering this series known as Babylon 5, and I've had the opportunity to have some really interesting and some, at times, hysterical conversations with fans like yourselves. But the thing I have realized is Babylon 5 in a lot of ways was ahead of its time, because J. Michael Straczynski in many ways himself was ahead of his time. And when he handled the concept of interspecies relations, and not to mention same-sex relationships, he did it with a touch of humor, but he also did it with a note of sincerity. And I think by the year 2261, while I am not an advocate for it, I cannot say that I condone it, nor will I condemn it. Same-sex marriage is no longer an issue. And while as a Christian, I can't condone it, I will not condemn those who want to live that sort of life. They will have to answer to a power higher than me. All I can do is show them kindness, respect, and dignity from a devout Christian.
Very well said, Ambassador.
To a person outside of the Christian community. And
I
even if that person...
Sorry,
ahead,
Ambassador.
No, go ahead.
Saying,
I've said my piece. Go ahead, Elysium.
No, what many Christians, and it's like I'm Catholic, what many forget is you're supposed to go out and make disciples of the nations. You're not supposed to go out and go, you're bad, and do nothing to them. You're supposed to offer them a cloak to help, to be, and say, well, here I'm offering, but love the person and don't condemn them, don't shun them. What many people seem to do, it's just put a person down because of who they are and ignore them. That's not what you do. You accept them for who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you judge everyone on the content of their character and not on other superficial things like sexual orientation and various other things. I've never understood this, because in my view, it's always been, I've always looked at bigotry towards those types of things as absolutely ludicrous, because the reality is, when you think about it, what does your sexual orientation have to do with me? And whatever you decide to do in the privacy of your own home with the people that you choose to love, who am I to tell you who you can and cannot love, who you can choose to spend your life with or spend your time with? It never ceased to amaze me how those kinds of things that literally have nothing to do with anybody individually, other than the people directly involved, it always fascinates me. It's like, listen, if you're a good person, if you have a good heart, if you're a good and you're decent and you stand for the right things and you do right by people, the only thing people should judge you upon is the content of your character. That is the most important element as a human being that you should have and you should strive for. So I've always looked at life like that. I don't care if you're gay, straight, whatever your sexual orientation is your own business. The only thing that I'm concerned with is what type of a person you are. Period.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I'll dig into that a little bit, but I want to send a shout to the chat. Josh Bowen and Leroy Kong, gentlemen, good to see you both. And thank you for popping in. I do appreciate it. And I'll bring up Colin's comment here. And it is very appropriate here. Oh, sorry, long one.
We were talking. Oh, is that when we were talking about interspecies mating rituals?
No, that was just that was just from a little bit ago. No, this is the one I wanted to bring from Colin. Hate the sin, but love the sinner. And Colin, that is honestly how I try to live my life. I hate the sin that a person feels that they have to live in. And and this is a conversation that I think the church, the big C church, the whole body needs to have an honest conversation about. Do I believe that a same-sex couple should have equal protection under the law? Yes, I do. Absolutely. But the issue for me is, and I know I may ruffle some feathers with this take. If I do not mean to offend, but this is just my perspective. I am very traditionalist. I am very conservative on this point. It seems like a desecration of the church, the building itself. If a same-sex couple wants to have their wedding there, because marriage was defined by God, and yes, I do believe it was defined by God, between one man and one woman. Anything else is outside of God's or divine decree.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
And I'm just and that's why I wanted to interject before you continued. The question I have is, based on what you're saying and having that traditionalist viewpoint.
Yeah.
What would you say? How would you feel about, say, for example, let's just give a hypothetical. If tomorrow, let's just use the Minbari, for example. If tomorrow Minbari were to come to Earth, and after several decades on the planet Earth, the Minbari begin to integrate with humankind. And eventually you have couplings, you have pairings between Minbari and human beings. If same-sex marriages are essentially a sin or go against the church or the sacrament of God, or however you want to look at it, how would you define a marriage between, say, a Minbari and a human being? Essentially, it's like that's the conundrum, because when I look at things like that, and I look at things like religious values and things like that, I feel like as a society, we could sit here and profess our love for science fiction like Star Trek and Babylon 5 and that type of stuff, and if that science fiction teaches us anything, it teaches us about being open-minded towards other things and acceptance of other races and other species and other things. So essentially, if you have a problem with for example, a same-sex marriage, then what would you consider a human and alien pairing to be? Because eventually that would be what you would get if, say, we were to have aliens integrate with human society. So that's kind of where I sit on that. I find it like, as human beings, we have to get past we have to get past the blinders that we wear when it comes to human interaction and who humans are allowed to love. Can humans love other human beings regardless of sex or religious beliefs or whatever? Because again, when it comes down to it, what would God say traditionally about a human and alien relationship? You're gonna that's where you're gonna have a struggle, because if you're against same sex, or you're against these people over here pairing with these people over there, then alien human couplings are going to have a really, really hard time. And those kinds of things are bound to happen in a in a society that's integrated with species from other planets or other universes or whatever have you. But that's just my take on it. Just something to think about,
Yeah. Well, and your question does have merit, and I will address, Colin. I do see your comment there, and I will address it here in just a minute as well. But I do want to answer Zod's comment or your question, and I will do it to the best of my ability. As with all things, I think the Christian community, if we were ever to be contacted by extraterrestrial life, that would be another conversation we're going to have. We're going to have a genuine, a very candid one with ourselves. And it might even bring us to a point where we have to possibly reconsider the concept of, look, here's the thing for me, and this is just my perspective on it. I don't care if a man and a man or a woman and a woman want to be in a relationship with one another. That to me is not the issue. It's not even an issue if they want equal protection under the law. That again is not the issue. I don't have an issue with either one of those concepts. It's just the concept of them using particular verbiage and wanting to have particular venues to perform the ceremony. That for me is the issue. It seems like to me is I don't want to use a perversion, so is a disrespect to the traditional concept of marriage. You want to call it a civil union? Fine. You want to call it whatever you want to call it? That's fine. The issue for me always has been central to the fact that you want to do it in God's house, when in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the congregation of that particular church or that denomination, what you're doing we view as sin, and it's wrong. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I'll give you an example, and I think a real life example from my own perspective. My first marriage to my now ex-wife, we were living together for almost 2.5 years before we got married. The church that we were a part of said, we can't allow you to have a wedding in the sanctuary because y'all have been living together. We understood that. And I particularly understood that because I had been for a very long time have been a devout Christian, so I understood it would look very poorly on the church for a couple that have been living together outside of wedlock to be allowed to have a ceremony in the church. Now, they allowed us to have our ceremony at another facility that was on the church campus, and the pastor we wanted to preside over the wedding, he was more than happy to do so. It was just the simple fact that we couldn't have it in that particular space. So it's kind of it's a little difficult to parse all of this out, because while we as Christians are very sympathetic to the whole concept of people being in love, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because while we love that person, we can't accept or we can't necessarily condone how they want to live. We don't hate them for it. It's just a simple fact that it falls outside of our particular perspective as how life is supposed to be ordered as God had defined it. Now, I do want to address Colin's comment here, and I do believe there is some truth in what I do believe there is a lot of truth in what he is saying here. I would suspect that the ability to produce children would be a major point, as it seems to be a part of the religious problem. We can't think of a better word to say with same-sex marriage. Yes, Colin, that is true. If you have nothing but same-sex marriage, eventually the human race is going to die out, because you don't have people having children. That was one of the other things you have to look at. God told Adam and Eve, if you believe Scripture, which, as I have said before, I believe that the Bible is the authoritative word of God. It was God's word given to man.
Yeah, but reproduction. If you really look at the Bible, and this is another thing that I've always struggled with in terms of conservatism on that level. The Bible itself, when it speaks of marriage as a union between a man and woman, is essentially talking about reproduction. They're not really talking about anything else. They're talking about reproduction. So as far as loving who you want to love and being with whoever you want to be with, I agree with you, Ambassador. That's not the issue. You can love whoever you want to love. You can be with whoever you want to be. But the word marriage essentially is, so a lot of times, I know a lot of people that are super conservative and have the view that if you have sexual relations outside of wedlock, you are essentially already married. Everything else is just a formality, because essentially marriage is the bond between the man and the woman, designed for reproduction. It's designed for a child to be born, for something, for reproduction to continue. As you pointed out, that if all we have is same-sex relationships, then there will be the human race will eventually die out. But I would also like to make this point that you don't have to necessarily, to reproduce, you don't necessarily have to be in love. You can have a one-night stand and have a child due to that situation. A gay man and a lesbian woman could have a sexual relationship simply for the purpose of having a child. So you see, essentially, my whole thing is with the reproduction. And to answer Bureau 31 here, where he says, what I don't understand is that some people, Babylon 5, Star Trek, don't understand that a conservative can like a piece of fiction without agreeing with it. But what you're essentially saying there, then, Bureau 31, is if you like it and you don't necessarily agree with it, you don't truly like it, because if you truly like it and you truly embrace it, it's because a lot of those values and those things being put on display, and those things that are being brought to you, those points that are being made, are resonating with you, which is why you're drawn to it. Like, for example, like Babylon 5. I can look at Babylon 5 and see all of these things that Michael Straczynski is trying to show us or trying to give us. If you vehemently disagree with the values that are being put on display to you from J. Michael Straczynski, how are you saying that you like it, but you don't agree with it? So by that very notion, you could essentially be by your logic, you could essentially be a devil worshiper who enjoys reading the Bible, is what you're basically saying. It's kind of, I don't really get how that correlates. If you like something and you love something, it's because you are in agreement with what you are seeing. You are the values of the content are resonating with you. So if you don't agree with it, it's not resonating with you. It's going over your head. You're not getting it. You're not absorbing it. It's not about liking it or not liking it. But if you don't, it's like when people have this debate about whether or not they always look at things and say, well, I can't watch this movie because it promotes a certain political agenda, or I can't watch this because it's a desecration of A, B, C, D, or E, but I still like it. I mean, I have a hard time with that. I think it's you really have to think about it, because if anything, Star Trek and Babylon 5 are optimistic, and they try to show that human beings can move beyond their platitudes and their narrow-mindedness and be open to a more to a wider view, which is why
Yes.
you always have these scenarios with aliens, and you have the very notion that someone like Sheridan and Delenn could be together, can have a relationship, and could have a child. That child is not fully human. That child, David Sheridan, is part Minbari. So I have to ask, how would the church look upon that part Minbari child? You're not. Is it still considered a child of God? Is it still considered a holy union? Because the Minbari certainly are not coming from the same spiritual plane as a conservative Christian would be. So that's what my question really. That's where my question really would fall, because I really wonder about those kinds of things. I mean, because I can look at Star Trek, and while I'm not like the world's biggest fan of what modern Star Trek has become, I personally feel like Star Trek from the 1960s provided us with plenty of that same type of optimism and openness amongst things. Like if you look, for example, and I know it's a little bit off topic, but if you look, I think it's germane to what Ambassador was saying. If you look at, Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura had the very first interracial kiss on television.
Yeah.
That was the very first time a white man kissed a black woman on TV. So you see, Star Trek was ahead of its time. Star Trek was always progressive, and essentially Babylon 5 is the same thing. Babylon 5 is once again trying to open up people's worldview, open up people's universal view of things. And I'm not saying that everybody has to be, full on liberal and full on, liberal and support everything whole hog and be okay with everything and have no hangups whatsoever. But what I'm saying is, it's a really legitimate question that if we as human beings cannot get beyond the narrow-mindedness of marriage between anyone essentially human, how is it going to correlate when aliens eventually do become a part of our society?
I can answer what the Catholic Church teaches on aliens. They said if aliens appeared over St. Peter's Square tomorrow morning, nothing would change, because God created the entire universe. They are children of God too, and would have a place in his salvation. So the church's teaching on David Sheridan would be, he's just as much a child of God as if he was from two human parents.
But you would still have a level of conservatism that would view that as an abomination on the church. You would still have, because again, if you have, like the example that Ambassador gave was absolutely perfect. He's like, because me and my ex-wife were living together, we weren't allowed to have a traditional ceremony. In my view, that's essentially BS. That makes no sense. If you are, here's the thing. If you have a viewpoint, and it, regardless of what it would be, ultimately, it's like, it goes back to what I was saying. You can love who you want to love. You can be who you want to be with. You can ultimately make your decisions. But at the end of the day, your views, whatever your views are, have to essentially give way to changes in whatever happens in life. And like I said, with aliens, that's going to eventually become a part of our society, whether it happens when we are together or not. I mean, when we're still alive or not. I don't know how many years away or decades we are away from aliens, but I believe we will eventually have aliens, and they will eventually be integrated into our society. And again, there's going to always be a conservative side that's going to be against
Yes.
that, and against any kind of mating rituals like all the ones we were talking about. That's going to be completely frowned upon. And I love how Straczynski likes to take that, the point you made, Elysium, about how bigotry essentially changed from being basic bigotry from a human being to human being to now being bigotry based off of aliens of different types and different species and that type of thing. So if all we do as human beings is change our bigotry from our bigotry just continues, does that essentially mean that bigotry is eternal and it's never going to go away? It's going to be a situation where, okay, we're not bigots towards each other anymore. We're just bigots towards humans. So now the church essentially will accept same-sex marriage because now you have aliens. So now you have another thing that you can say, well, it's a desecration of the Lord. It's a desecration of something holy because now you're bringing in this alien, this interloper. So so that's where I question it all, because it essentially, and it goes back to my point about Uhura and Captain Kirk from the original Star Trek. As human beings, we essentially keep moving the goalposts, and that's why we never have any consistency. We always take 2 steps forward only to take 2 steps back, and we get mixed up in political crap and all kinds of other things that essentially don't allow us to move forward and become one with the universe. How do we ever expect to become an advanced species and against eventually go beyond the rim if we can't get past simple human bigotries that just simply evolve over time? Those are all questions I have, and I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but it just rattled my brain because I just started thinking about Sheridan and Delenn and their child, David.
And if let me interject here. The thing for me is, and I agree with Elysium's take, even though granted I'm not formerly a part of the Catholic Church. It is a perspective that I hold as a Protestant Christian, that any life that God creates, let me be specific, any sentient life that God creates is a creation of His, and thereby is a child of God. Now, granted, that particular alien race may not be part of a monotheistic religious structure to any degree, perspective, and we look at them. Now, if, as Elysium said, and as you have said, Zod, if Minbari were to appear over St. Peter's Square tomorrow morning, it would change. It would change how we look at ourselves in terms of how we view ourselves in the universe, because we now realize that we are not alone. But it also would, I think, force us to reevaluate a lot of these prejudices and these biases and these bigotries that we carry within ourselves. And I will say this in terms of the whole concept of interracial relationships and interracial marriages and even interracial children. I don't care. Human is human. And I kind of look at the same way the union between John Sheridan and Delenn Sheridan, I guess, if she took Sheridan's last name, we never know. And David Sheridan, their son. Yes, he is half Minbari, but he is also part human, but he is also a child of God. I mean, you even want, if you want to take a leap into the fantasy realm, in a way, Tolkien explored this, but he never fully addressed it. Because think about it. The marriage or the union between Aragorn and Arwen is an interspecies or an interracial relationship, human and elven. And they have a child, a son, who himself is half elf. I mean, Elrod is half elven because I believe it was his mother who was human, but his father was, I believe, either just regular human or Numenorian. So Tolkien even dealt with this, but he never openly addressed it. He left it open for others to discuss themselves because at the time it wasn't at the forefront of his thinking. But if you think about it, fantasy and fiction, science fiction, or fiction of any kind has dealt with the concept of races commingling and coexisting. And coexisting means eventually, I mean, you even look at another, I think, a somewhat underappreciated and overlooked science fiction franchise, both the movie and this television series, Alien Nation, deals with how we as humans deal with an alien species that comes into our midst. And I think even there are a few episodes, or even the movie deals with the whole concept of human and alien relationships.
Yes, and they also delve very deep into the idea of the bigotry that exists when you have those human and alien those human and alien couplings, because there is a situation where they do want to get married and that kind of thing. So all of that is essentially addressed, and that is essentially looked upon in some circles as an abomination. Once again, like Elysium was saying, it's like the bigotry is being transferred from one set to another. And again, it's just like, again, moving the goalpost, I start to think about it. So I'm like, okay, so then these aliens will eventually be accepted, and it will no longer be frowned upon to mate with these aliens in particularly. But then you'll have another alien race that will come to Earth, and there'll be bigotry and hatred towards that alien race. So it just keeps transferring. So I don't understand how as human society, that's why I say human beings as a species are really just generally, when you think about it, fickle and stupid, because again, you're going to eventually get to a point where you want to move beyond all of this so you can basically achieve bigger and better things. And the only way you're going to achieve bigger and better things, as like Star Trek and Babylon 5 and all these great sci-fi epics has taught us, is if you can move beyond basic human prejudices that just don't seem to want to go away no matter what happens.
I hope bigotry, as things like in this universe expands, and it no longer holds an issue with race or gender, that like as it expands out like a bubble, it'll eventually burst. As it encompasses more that it accepts, eventually it'll become so stretched that that bigotry can't sustain itself, and it's no longer an issue.
I don't know, Elysium. I mean, I don't know, man. Even look at the Night Watch. Look at at all the different groups. Even on Babylon 5, it's showing you that bigotry continues to prevail and continues to fester no matter what happens. That's the problem. It's like you're always gonna have it. You're always gonna have a portion of society that's going to feel that way. No matter what you do, you can't cut it out. It's like, unless what has to happen, it has to start with education. As children need to be brought up not to believe in any kind of bigotry, not to even think along the lines of bigotry. Bigotry needs to be eliminated at a molecular level so that it doesn't continue to grow and to fester. Otherwise, you're going to continue to have groups like the Night Watch and such, and that kind of thing, and it's just going to continue to go on and on and on because it's generational. That's the reason why we haven't been able to get rid of it as a society, because you have the old generation that felt that way and passed that racism and bigotry onto future generation, and then so on and so forth. It just continues to go on. It's a pattern of discontent, essentially.
Very true.
I hope what I see in the world is what I see outside my window. The neighborhood I live in, there's a lot of different races, and the kids play together, not on racial grounds, but just as kids. They're knocking around
Yes.
together. There's Muslim kids and black kids, white kids. They're playing together and they fight together. And when two groups fight, there's black, white on one side, there's black, white on the other, and they're screaming abuse at each other. And the race does not matter. They're just kids playing. And I see them as they're getting older. It's the same thing. I'm really hopeful for what I see outside my window, because I told those kids, yeah, you know what? This world has prejudice, but you got to stick together. You guys, you're all different colors, but you live in this community. You're brothers, and look out for each other, because that's what will change things.
Absolutely.
And those kids play together, and they look out for each other. Yeah, they scream abuse at each other, and every now and again I get them called, "He's a bastard, he called me a name." And I'm like, oh yeah, just get over it.
Yeah.
But when I heard kids outside of the area calling them, racially abusing them, I said, that's unacceptable. And no one should accept that.
Yeah.
And I gave them a pep talk, kids. You realize you are better than name calling. It doesn't matter what they call you, you maintain who you are. You're kids, you get on, great. At the time, there was actually 3 different races. And I say, lads, you're all the same age. You work together. If you can get over that bigotry, you will be successful. You won't be blaming others for your own faults. You'll achieve on your own. And when things turn around, you'll be employing them.
Exactly. So.
And don't hold yourself up on, don't let it get to you.
Very well said. Yes.
Yeah. So
I agree.
I'm sorry, I just popped something in the private chat along the lines of what Sodwriter was saying about what JMS mentioned on when humans meet aliens. I think I'll read it out. I don't think Earth Force cares about sexual orientation. The reason we just said it out there without comment is that having come to the realization that other non-human races, a little thing like sexual orientation, nobody will even care about. It won't be an issue.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. That's why I say it shouldn't be an issue now. And I think that and you guys ever stop to think that maybe because humanity is so filled with simple juvenile prejudices that this is a reason why we haven't really had any like full on, first contact situations in human history right now, simply because other more highly advanced, more highly intelligent races probably look at human beings as like galactic trash that can't get along with themselves. And I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't had a first contact situation, because there's so much stubbornness and bitterness and anger within humanity with itself, that until humanity can at least come to terms with who we are as a species, no interstellar races are going to be interested at all in anything that humans want at this point.
Yeah. And I do want to, we're going to wrap up here in just a minute, but I do want to address Josh Bowens and everybody that's been in the chat. You all had some great comments in here today, and thank you all so much for a great conversation, and thank you for being here every single week. And you all are as much a part of the show as well being and the council is. So, and I hope you all enjoyed this. If you really enjoyed this stream and you want other people to hear about it, if you're on social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, whatever, share the stream out, because these are the type of conversations I've always wanted the council to be about. Yes, we talk about the show week after every week, but it's conversations like this that I really enjoy, and I want other people to have the opportunity to hear about them as well. But I want to bring Josh Bowen's comment up here because there is much truth in it. It's very simplistically said. All people we can evil will always be, unfortunately. Colin, that is very articulate and very said and very, when I say simplistically said, it is not meant as a dismissal. You're able to simplify it down to the core basis of the idea. And the ideal is this: the fact that evil exists in the world. And that evil manifests itself in many different ways. But for visionaries like Roddenberry, and for those that came after him, and for Straczynski, and for the people that were responsible for The Expanse, and all these other series and properties that we love and are fans of, it addresses a very simple idea. Evil may never be truly stamped out. But so long as we continue to fight against it and educate others to think for themselves and have their own perspective rather than walking in March step, then we as a species will eventually evolve. It may not be in our generation.
It won't be our generation. It won't
be the generation. It may be the generation after us.
It won't be that one either. It's going to be like we're talking about, if humanity can survive, we're talking about at least about 10 or so generations, because again, we can't even get past our own simplistic disagreements about politics and goofy stuff that really shouldn't matter. So ultimately, if you can't get past any of that, how are you supposed to evolve? I just don't see it.
I was actually told one way to deal with, just accept. Years ago, I had depression and I went to counseling, and the counselor said to me, realize that everyone has prejudice, but just don't be ruled by it.
Exactly.
And I think that's how we can cope. Just realize everyone carries that prejudice within them. And if we can just accept that and realize that in ourselves, we can roll back a little. I see it outside the window. Those kids are not prejudiced towards each other. And I hope that my children, God willing, will have the attitude those kids have, that they won't carry the full prejudice I have. Every person will carry their own, but maybe a little less in each generation. And as that becomes the norm, we'll see a society where race, gender, whatever God you pray to, whatever your orientation, it won't matter. Prejudice will still be there. I think, Zod, you're right. Unfortunately, I think it may be with us till the universe turns cold. But
when you look at it, Mountains of Elysium, I look at it like this. There's also we're heading towards, if what scientists have said is true, we're heading towards the singularity, which is said to be happening in 2045, which means that in 2045, technology will be at a point where we will be able to virtually achieve essentially immortality as human beings, because there will be nanotechnology that will pretty much be able to virtually cure any disease or ailment, to literally allow humans to exist for as long as they wish to. So I sort of look at it this way. If we can at least make it as human beings to 2045, to the singularity, once we are in a position to be better and basically have longevity of life and be able to live longer, and to be able to live our own, however long we wish to live. Once humanity gets to that point, maybe they'll get to a point where they start living for the betterment of humankind instead of always being at war with one another, and that includes the prejudices and the bigotries and the things that we were talking about. But again, I think it literally is going to take something like that, essentially like a Big Bang, or perhaps, and this is something I was thinking, perhaps an evil alien invasion can bring humanity together. I mean, at this point, you gotta figure it's gonna take, because I kind of, this is kind of an interesting thing that I thought about too. When at the beginning of this whole pandemic that we're living through, when this thing started, I kind of got the impression that with this being being a global thing, that we would essentially maybe come together as human beings for the betterment of humankind in the face of a health crisis that basically affects you no matter where you are in the world. If this couldn't bring humanity together in a positive way, I don't think anything short of a full-scale alien invasion can do it, because at this point, all that pandemic thing did is divide people politically. That's all it did. It didn't bring humanity together. It didn't make anything better. It basically created a human regression, in a sense, and did nothing for the betterment of humankind. We're still not out of the woods on this, because people can't decide whether they want to do A, B, C, or D. They can't decide if they want to follow the rules, if they want to get a vaccine, if they don't want to get vaccinated, if they want herd immunity. There's so many things they disagree about. Nobody can agree on nothing, so therefore nothing gets achieved, nothing changes, and we're all still living through it. So I feel like that's what it's going to take. It's going to take like an evil alien invasion to bring humanity together. I just hope we can live to the singularity, because I'd like to see the singularity happen, because maybe then we'll get to a point where we can get beyond all of this. But man, Elysium, I'm trying to, I try, but when I look at humanity in the way that it is now, I'm not very happy with the human race at this point.
Yeah, and I understand that. So
I wonder, would it be an Altered Carbon situation, that singularity, if you know the franchise?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe. So, well, guys, like I said, we're going to go and wrap up, but really, truly, guys, a great discussion. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And to everybody in the chat today, whether you've been here from the beginning or whether this is your first time here, I hope you enjoyed this stream. Make sure you leave your comments down below with anything me or Elysium or Zod or Fiona brought up through this stream. And we had some laughs. We've had some great deep conversation, and we'll of course be back next week for you with another installment of the Council of Ones, and we'll be continuing our review of season 4. So I want to let you all know I will not be going live tomorrow night. Be having a belated night out with the fellas, a belated birthday night out with the fellas and everything. So but I will be back Sunday afternoon with installment of Afternoons with the Ambassador, and I'll be doing a little chat about Marvel. Be talking about the last couple episodes of What If, and also be giving you my thoughts on the trailer for Hawkeye. So be sure to tune in for that. And we are closing in on 450 subscribers. So if you are not already subscribed, and if you know of anyone that likes this type of content, share this out on social media and tell them, hey, there's this little channel called the Ambassadorial Wing. They do some really great conversation. Go check him out. And that doesn't go just for myself. That also goes for Zodrider. That goes for Mountains of Elysium. That goes for Piano Wolf, for Classic Comics, even though he hasn't been here in a while. And we hold his place for him until he's able to come back. I know he's currently working on a degree and everything. So Classic, if you catch this, we miss you, man, but we wish you the best, and we look forward to when you take your place amongst us again. So, but that all being said, folks, you have a great afternoon and evening. We will see you next week. And until next week, this is the Council of One saying 3, 2, 1.
Woo!
Not exactly what I was going for. Zooty zoot zoot.
Zooty zoot zoot.
Zoot.
We'll see you next week. Peace.
Zoot.